Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. After drinking a can of beer, David went home. His heart felt anxious and heavy. He knew what his wife, Molly, would say. When once again you hear this at a reasonable premium. She met him on the threshold of the apartment. Why so humble? I wish she had been at work today, thought David, and with a sigh answered, salary came. And, did you get fined again? My wife grinned. I did not doubt it. Take your clothes off, eat. Again, I have to pay the loan myself, she grumbled. She went to her room. I did not do it on purpose, of course. You only do not change jobs on purpose. Everything else happens by chance. David, I'm tired. I can't stand to see you wasting your time and health in that damn ambulance. You're always there on weekends and holidays. They can even call you in from vacation. It's like living without a husband. Honestly, you can't go. You can't go anywhere with your paycheck. You're afraid to even buy popcorn at the movies because then you won't have anything to live on. Your classmate at Nick's, by the way, also has less work at a private clinic, and he gets more money. He and Clara go to the sea every year. They save for a house. He gives her gold rings with diamonds. All you do is work at a loss. Why are you doing this? You know I love my job and want to help people for a pittance, his wife interrupted. Why do not you help in a private clinic? Drunkards are more interesting to deal with than normal people. You do not understand, of course. Where do I go? Altruistic ways for me are inscrutable. I could get more money to take care of my family. Change your rusty car and live like normal people. What are you gonna do? Go after pennies with everybody. You don't think about anybody but yourself. And I want kids, by the way. Not at 30, not at 40, but now while I'm 25. At least one. And what about children, if we are in debt like Silk? David walked up to his wife and hugged her. What do you love? I don't earn that little. Just below the city average. So live off your average until you retire. I'm sick of it, Molly said, pulling out a suitcase. Are you leaving? In a confused voice, asked David. Yes. Grabbing his spouse, he said, I'm not letting you go anywhere. Please understand me, but not mine. It's in the offices to sit and add to the plans for the nick of patients to deceive people, prescribing unnecessary paid tests. I can't do that, but you can work for a pittance. Continuing in the same vein, said Molly, broke away from his embrace and continued to pack. Do push-ups in the morning on the bar, pull-ups to all sorts of drunken dismissals on a stretcher in the car. And I'm going to my mother's. I'm sick of putting up with it all. You start earning like Nick, then I'll come back. Molly, I'm not Nick. I can't do that. If I leave, who's gonna save people? Who would save you from a divorce? Do you want a divorce? Not yet. But if you intend to go on living like this, expect a letter from the court in a couple of months, said the wife and took the suitcase and left the apartment. David ran after her to the elevator. Wait, Molly, but you have to understand that this job is my life. I can't give it all up just for the money. Don't you know what it's like to be able to save a man at the last minute, to save him from death? People thank me. You see, they give me gifts. Let me know when, besides cognac and candy, they'll start paying your mortgage as president or give you a normal car instead of the old tin, said Molly, and stepped into the elevator cab. Goodbye, lifeguard. 2 weekends passed in binges. Molly didn't answer texts or phone calls, demanded not to disturb her. David, bored, asked to understand himself. Back to dinner, adamantly stood her ground. He had to change jobs first, realizing he wanted to keep his family. David began looking at job openings at local private clinics. Waking up for work at 600 a.m., he felt a headache. After taking a pill, he began exercising and making himself breakfast. The new shift in the ER promised to be challenging. The resuscitation team physician broke her back and asked David to fill in for her. The first call was to the scene of an accident. A girl had driven into a guardrail. She suffered an open arm fracture and was unconscious. Realizing that the situation was serious and there was a morning traffic jam, David advised Alex, the driver of their car, to drive to the accident scene in their yards. It was literally 5 minutes to their destination. When the path was blocked by 2 foreign cars standing at emergency lights, the young car owners were talking with their windows down and in no hurry to leave. Alex sounded the horn. Ignoring him, the guys continued their conversation. What he saw made David furious. As a doctor, he knew every minute could be crucial. Getting out of the car, David approached the foreign car on the left that was blocking the road the most. He knocked on the roof and asked for the ambulance to please make way. We rushed to the scene of the accident. The driver there is unconscious and needs medical attention. Every minute counts. We're in a hurry, too, replied the owner of the foreign car, smiling defiantly. I can't help it. I didn't notice. We are not the first minute behind you. So why are you standing there? You should take a detour if you are so pressed for time. There's a traffic jam right now. We'll lose 20 minutes. Please give way, asked David, once again trying to keep his composure. I'm not going anywhere. I'm waiting for her. She's about to get out. What's the big deal? Drive around. You're legally required to give way to an ambulance. If the horn is on, get lost. We don't live by the law in this country. Unable to contain his anger any longer, David grabbed the guy by the collar, pulled him to him, and told him to move the car now before I smash your face in. I won't say it again. Not so fast. The driver of the second foreign car intervened in the conversation. Do you even know who the doctor is going after? I don't care who the president is. A man is dying there. Get those cars out of the way. Tony, that doctor is stupid. Call your daddy, said the blond man to the comrade. And wrenching himself out of David's hands, he pulled a Singer can from the glove compartment. Seeing this, he took the owner of the car by the ear, pulled it out of the window, and said, just try to use it, and I'll bury you right here. Drop it. The cheeky man obediently threw the object on the second seat, and now slowly drive the car behind me. I'll pull your ear in the right direction to pull away following. Liam will get out of the car. Punch him in the jaw, yelled Tony. What's the point? I went to boxing when I was a kid. So you're Liam, huh? David said. That's what Liam is. Don't listen to your friend, you'll be safer. And it takes you longer to fight than it does to pull away. The cocky fellow listened to the doctor by the ear and slowly moved his car in front of his comrade's car. That's all. Thank you. Now at least until morning you can wait for whoever you want, David said and went back to the car. What a hero you are today, Alex said to him with a smile. You've got a nerve. They see the ambulance coming. And no matter what. And what if one of their relatives or friends was in an accident? They don't get into accidents. They were born with immortality, the driver joked. Arriving at the scene of the call, David quickly assessed the girl's condition and began administering first aid. His paramedic partner discovered an open arm fracture and applied a makeshift splint to fix the broken limb and prevent further tissue damage. Together, they placed the girl on a stretcher to carry her to a vehicle. She's lost a lot of blood, David said. I hope she makes it. For a second, the victim opened her eyes and looked at him, then lost consciousness again. And if that rich man had moved faster, this wouldn't have happened, the paramedic observed. If the stupidity of people sometimes amazes me. When they arrived at the hospital, David informed the trauma surgeon of the patient's condition. He returned to the car with joy and a sense of accomplishment. A life had been saved. The last thing David expected was to go to jail for his actions. It turns out that the owner of the foreign car, Liam, whom he had forced out of the way. He was the son of Robert, a well-known banker in the state. After talking to him, Tony, the child of the local prosecutor, it is unknown which of the two decided to complain about David's actions to his parents. But the result was not long in coming. Liam accuses you of torturing, threatening, and insulting his person for his own benefit. That's 3 articles of the criminal code. If the victim wins the case, You are in big trouble. What can you counter that? Asked the free lawyer given to him. I mean, they must have DVR footage that proves it. The guys say the memory card was full, and there's no recording. Conveniently thought of. No argument there. Anything I said could have been construed as a threat. But I just took Liam by the ear while he was sitting in the car and told him to follow me to get his car out of the way. Is that torture? His buddy next to him testified against you, saying that you threatened and physically abused Liam to make him give way, that you would ask for the emergency video recorder. You will see for yourself that no such thing happened. David told the lawyer his version of what happened and asked to bring Alex into the case as a witness. After listening to his client, the lawyer assured him that the case would not be difficult to win. In the terrible conditions of the general cell of the detention center, it was hard to sleep on the bunks placed 2 tiers side by side with the floor and a lot of people. And all around there was a terrible stench, which David had never encountered, even when coming to the dormitory for calls to alcoholics. On the appointed day, he sat on a bench in the courtroom with his hands tied. David was sure of his innocence, but he was still worried. It was unlikely that the banker's son had simply decided to scare him. The parents of both boys were present and looked on with contemptuous confidence. Molly did not come to support her spouse. David's mother watched her son with bated breath, awaiting the court's verdict. Next to her, hugging her shoulders, sat his father. David looked into their eyes, trying to assure them without words that everything would be okay. But inside, for some reason, his heart clenched treacherously with terror. It was frightening to imagine that he could go to jail for his right actions. In his testimony, Liam lied and twisted his words so much that David almost laughed. As a defendant, he and Alex appeared before the judges confidently, when it already seemed that the case had been won. Liam's lawyer came out and said, "Notice, Your Honor, how terrified my client is of the presence of this fiend in a white coat in the courtroom. He can't concentrate from the horror he has experienced." David's colleague claims that Liam did not want to miss the ambulance, deliberately ignoring in his words that both cars had activated the emergency signal and therefore could not drive and were waiting for a tow truck. By his stubbornness, David simply forced my client to risk his expensive property. Instead of heeding and taking a different road to the call, as he was told to do. The recording from the ambulance's DVR proves it. What he heard angered David. "Your Honor, there was never any question of a tow truck. Liam told me he was waiting for the defendant's girlfriend." Remained silent. "We have heard your side of the story," the judge replied, and again gave the floor to counsel. After a recess, the court announced the verdict. David was found guilty of the crimes and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He could hardly believe his ears. His mother cried. David decided not to give up and appealed the sentence, but nothing could be changed. Remembering his wife's pleas to change jobs, he suddenly thought he should have listened to her. Who knows? Perhaps a private clinic would have saved him from the bitter fate of a prisoner. Realizing that he would never again be able to do what he loved, David fell into a depression. Ahead of him awaited prison, where he could not hope to meet anything good. Before prison, it seemed to David that the worst attitude he saw was the ingratitude and boorishness of people while working in the ER. It wasn't until he became an inmate that he saw much worse treatment. For 2 days he had to ride in a train car, not being able to sleep or go to the bathroom. There was only bread and tuna as food. When he got there, he was greeted by the newcomers, and the other prisoners were terrified and threatening. No one here spoke in a humane manner. The detainees were shouted at with foul language, and at the slightest disobedience, the prison escort used force. As soon as everyone was lined up, the reception for personal matters began. The officer on duty shouted out the names. He came out of the line, called out his details of the article under which he was convicted. The beginning of serving his end. After that, there was a search for 2 weeks. The whole stage was sent to quarantine. The activists created problems for the new detainees on a daily basis. In one day, David had to defend himself and stand up for others more than once. Finally, sitting on his horse, he wistfully remembered his home and his comfortable couch. Not so long ago, everything could be changed. All you had to do was listen to Molly. After mastering 6 behind bars, David realized he wanted to send letters to his parents and spouse. The message to his wife was the first. In it he wrote, "My dear Molly, every day I think of you and miss you. I can't believe I got into this situation, leaving you husbandless for 5 years. I'm sorry I let you down. I was foolish. I didn't appreciate. What did I have?" The answer came a month later. Delighted and received a letter from his beloved David, immediately began to read it, and from what he saw it lost the power of speech. Molly wrote, "Hello David. I have already filed for divorce, and they don't intend to take the lawsuit away. You should have buried your family before you went to prison. It was a huge mistake for me to tie my life to you, and I'm glad I didn't make a second one by having your children. I don't need any promises. Just get out of my life forever. I don't need a convict husband. Goodbye." David's hands shook. Dreams crumbled overnight. Life became meaningless. He no longer wanted to leave prison because no one was waiting for him on the outside except his parents. According to the new legislation, first-time offenders do not sit in the same prison as repeat offenders. This greatly reduced the number of problems between inmates. However, it did not cancel out the problems created by activists. Apparently, he didn't like one of them, for which he was beaten more than once and even put in the punishment cell. He thought with annoyance that he would have to endure the rat's humiliation until the end of his term. One day during dinner, David paid attention to the condition of an elderly criminal mastermind. His lips had turned gray. He was breathing heavily on his forehead. Forgetting everything in the world, he rushed over to the man and said, "Hello, everyone, please. You are in a pre-infarction condition. What are you, a doctor or something?" Immediately, David's sidekick Sam stepped in. "If you don't help me now, I'm going to have a big heart attack." "Listen to him," said Sam to his family, and then turned to David. "What do you need? You two, get the big one up in the air," David commanded. Then shouted to the prisoner on duty, "Bad, call a doctor and get some nitroglycerin." Sama was saved. Feeling obliged, he sent his men to David to invite him in for a talk. During the conversation, Sam offered to join his family. Seeing this as a chance to free himself from the beatings of an activist he had grown tired of, he agreed. The rest of his sentence passed quietly, and shortly before his release, a ring appeared on his middle finger, signifying that the guy had not been released early. "What do you plan on doing on the outside?" asked him the big one a couple of days before his release. "I don't know. They won't take me to the ER for sure. It's the end of my career as a doctor. I'll give you the address of my trusted man. If things get bad, you go to him. She'll give you a job," Sam said, and handed him a piece of paper. "We'll call him the Humpback. You tell him it's from a big one, and he'll understand. I told him about you." After taking the papers, David left the prison. Outside the gates, he felt freedom and fear. It was hard to imagine his new life after a criminal record. His parents greeted him with tears and hugs. The reaction of loved ones to his return warmed the soul. It was nice to feel needed again. "I had lost everything." "I'm sorry, Mom," David said, looking his mother in the eyes. "I know, son, I know. Don't worry. You have me and your father as my only ones left. I am so glad you are with me," he said, hugging his parents. "Let's go to the car. My baked pies." "Eat well," Dad said with a smile. "You can tell us how you smelled like a Christmas tree in the Ford your father bought." There were several airtight plastic containers of food in the backseat. "Pies, yes," my son smiled. "I see there are salads in there too. Mom, you don't change. Look how you dragged me away. I'm not going to feed you just pies. It won't be enough," my mother said. "There's also some meat foil wrapped in it. Eat up. It's been a long time since I've had one of these." David took a salad and with a smile sighed at the smell of it and began to eat. Yes, it was the food of the gods. God, how I've missed eating real food, he said in a satisfied voice. Bon appetit, wished him his father, and got behind the wheel. It was a long drive. David asked what had happened in the country during those 5 years, told his parents how happy he was to receive their letters. What happened to your apartment after the divorce? Mom asked. You took it on a mortgage together. Did Molly sue you? I don't know. I'll get some rest and find out. Did you at least get your papers back? Of course they did. What did you go to prison with? That's what you came back with. Here's the divorce certificate and the divorce stamp you'll have to get on your own. And when Spanky calls, I won't call. I want to look her in the eye. After all these years, David answered and felt resentment awaken inside at his ex-wife's action. No matter how much other inmates comforted him by telling him that wives almost always file for divorce if their husbands are convicted, David never could forgive love. To him, family is a union until the end of days, and there are no circumstances the couple cannot overcome together. Heard married, her mother said. Kind of even had a baby. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it. Dad intervened in the conversation. Why not? David will see everything anyway. If he was going to see her for a long time. Yes, we did not write. We did not want to upset you, the father answered. Well, let her be happy. David will have time to get married, too. Who needs me now? Ex-convict felon. The bride's parents, by the way, when they find out, they won't even let me talk to them. Oh, cut the crap, said the mother. They don't marry like that, believe me. Will there be a good woman for you? I hope so, sighed David. When he arrived at his parents' apartment after a long journey, he took a deep breath of the familiar smell. And with a smile he said, I'm home. Everything around seemed beautiful and new. The couch in the kitchen, the taste of food and drink, the softness of the bed. The latter he rejoiced over like a child. There was no longer the smell of the laundry that had accompanied him all 5 years of incarceration. 1 ton of sheets. Drawing himself a bubble bath, David climbed into the water with a happy smile, realizing that here was the beauty of freedom. The next morning, out of habit, I woke up early and did my exercises. His parents were still asleep, making himself an eyeful. He ate it with relish and went to Molly's. The keys to the intercom still fit. When he got to the right floor, David saw the new steel door in front of him. He pressed the bell. I stood in front of the peephole with a sinking heart, waiting for an answer. The door was opened by a big man with a wedding ring on his finger. Good morning. Molly lives here. Hello. Who's asking for her? The stranger asked in a bass voice. Ex-husband. Whoa. Molly, your ex-husband showed up. And the man shouted at her and told David to come in without standing in the doorway. Now I'll take things out into the hallway with the baby in his arms, came out the ex-wife. Well, hello, she looked down at him and said. She calls it a tea party, will not. I'm taking things, and Matt. You can't even say it right away, asked David, feeling the resentment growing. It's been so long since we've seen each other. What else should I tell you? Besides the fact that you don't live here anymore. He said, you can have your posters and your things, and handed them to him, rolled up into a tube. The posters. What do you know? I didn't throw them away. You hate this stuff, don't you? Thought we'd burn it after the divorce. You're glad. The ex-wife raised an eyebrow. What do you take me for? It's your stuff. I'm not burning anything. You'll be screaming your head off later. You've been married a long time. 3 years. The new husband answered, taking the suitcase out into the corridor. Do you want to go straight away or do you want coffee? But I could use a cup. You will not drink coffee in this house. Get out of here, screamed the ex. I don't need you here after all I've been through. You've been through. What was it like for me in prison to get that letter? You didn't think. Lost my patience, David. The baby in Molly's arms cried. Let's not have a fight, okay? Asked her husband. It's all over now. There's no need to reminisce. How could you bring him into our apartment? We chose it together, remember? So what? I was the only one who paid for it. Your salary was enough, except for food and toilet paper. Now go away. Don't be sentimental. After all these years, what's the point? I'm the only one who married you. So many years down the drain. Here's how. Feeling my soul tearing apart, David left the apartment with his things. The resentment made his stomach twist. He remembered taking out his first ever loan to give Molly a gold engagement ring. He remembered taking part-time jobs to save up for a modest wedding. He was in his final year of university at the time. How he'd assured his friends that she wasn't really that hysterical. They were against their wedding, said it wouldn't work out. My friends were right. There was a trash can by the driveway. Realizing she would never go back to that house again, David threw away the keys. At lunchtime, he went with his mother to the passport office to get himself registered in his parents' apartment. There was a long line in the room. The looks of people in his direction seemed hostile and suspicious. David felt that they saw him as a former prisoner, which made him feel out of place. One of the men paid attention to his hand middle finger, which had a tattoo in the form of a ring, and with a sneer, asked that passport was stolen. Are you following the words? David answered him. And if you want to fight with me, I'll teach you some sense. If your parents didn't teach you anything, leave your parents alone. They had nothing to do with it, said the boy, feeling himself begin to buy in. David walked right up to the man when the passport office worker came out into the waiting room and stood between them. The woman's face seemed familiar. Citizen, do not make a scandal out of nothing, she said. A provocative conflict. Nobody was robbed. Everybody's belongings are safe. If you don't want to stand in line with an ex-con, come at another time. The line agreed, for the young man nodded. She turned to David. Come over to me. I will take your questions out of line. As compensation for someone else's insolence, David looked at her closely and noticed the large scar on her arm. Forgive me for asking, he said, but did you happen to be in an accident 5 years ago? I was. She was surprised, and after looking at David closely, she asked, are you really the doctor? The one who saved my life? David bravely. The boy nodded. Lord, I've been looking for you. I wanted to thank you, but they told me you don't work in the ER anymore. That's true. I'm so glad I ran into you after all these years. You know, the surgeon said if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be alive. You wouldn't mind taking me out to dinner so I can thank you just a little bit. I'll pay for everything. Agreed. What time did she have in mind? The night after tomorrow, if you're not busy after 7. We can meet here after work. All right. What's your name? That's right. I forgot, Evelyn. A woman. How many times? There's a lady in line. There are other people here. Are you going to work or what? I'm sorry, Evelyn said, and turned to David again. What is your question? When he came out of the passport office with his mother, she poked him in the side with her elbow and said, good girl. I like Mom. It's just a thank you. The woman smiled and said, I see that she likes you. Believe me, son, my instincts have never failed me. As David left the restaurant, he was surprised to recall his mother's words and was glad that he had met a woman with whom he felt good and comfortable. Evelyn laughed at his jokes, was cheerful, and respected his past work in the ER. It was dark outside. Embarrassed, he asked if you wouldn't mind if I walked you home. I don't want you to think anything bad. It would make me feel safer. Of course, I'd be glad to walk with you some more, Evelyn replied, lowering her gaze. Her phone rang, and David heard the familiar music. It was the theme song from his favorite movie. It popped up on the display, son. Do you know where that tune came from? He asked, realizing that the ringtone could have been set by a child. Yes, it's our favorite Max movie. I'm sorry, I'll answer it, she said to David, and said into the phone. Yes, Max, something happened. The answer he heard made him freeze. What was it? If not a sign of destiny. It rushed through his mind. The wind carried David the words of Evelyn's son coming from the receiver. Daddy came, Lord, You didn't open the door for him, I hope. Frightened, Evelyn asked. No, we're not scared. Mom, he's drunkenly beating on the door with his fists. Wait, I'll be right out. Finish talking. She said, I'm sorry. I have to go home right away. I understand everything. I heard you. You didn't tell me you were married because I'm divorced. How drunk does your ex get? He comes in all the time. He won't give me any peace. Why does he want to come back? He wants to. But we don't need that drunk. Already called the police to no avail. I don't know what to do with him. Do you want me to go with you and talk to him? You what? What if you share? Someone will call the police again and you'll go to jail. For what? If he doesn't press charges, I won't go to jail. I don't know. You watch with excitement, said Evelyn, hailing a cab. Once outside the entryway, David noticed a drunken blonde man sitting on a bench who looked slightly older than himself. Seeing Evelyn, the drunk turned to her with a complaint. Where have you been going? Why can't I reach you? Because you're blocked. James, go away, please. The ex turned his attention to Evelyn David standing next to him and said, You're already dragging some man into the house. Find a replacement for me and go see your son. David told her, We're going to have a little man-to-man talk. James grinned. What are you going to talk to me about? Evelyn is mine. I got it. As soon as the door to the entryway closed behind Evelyn, David dragged her ex-husband to his jacket and said, Okay, look, here twice. I'm not saying it again. This is you don't show up outside your ex-wife's house. You don't write. You don't call her. You just pay child support for your son and visit him when you're allowed. Otherwise, you live your life. James tried to hit David, but he ducked, giving the ex-Evelyn a fist to the stomach. He continued with the street fighter. Don't try that out of you. Remember, come again, and you risk ending up in the hospital. I understand. I explain. Understood, said the man, and hurried away. Waiting for James to leave, David called Evelyn and reported that the problem was solved. Let's hope he won't come back here again. I hope you didn't have a fight with anxiety, she asked. No, he was too drunk for that. James was furious. He wasn't ready to give in to Evelyn, and determined to put David in his place for his recent humiliation. To get back at him, James enlisted the help of a criminal acquaintance of his. He met him by chance, fishing together on the same beach. For a long time, James had no idea who he was friends with until a colleague saw them at a picnic. How did you know him? With surprise, he asked James. Who? The hunchback. He is one of the most dangerous people in the city. You can't tell by his looks, but he's like a man. The acquaintances never dragged James into their affairs, never asked for help. They were just having a good time and became close when their wives filed for divorce, almost at the same time. Hunchback didn't hold on to his spouse, gave her his due share of the property for her and his son. He survived the loss of his family, after which he moved on with his life. James, on the other hand, hoped his wife would return until he received a court summons and has not been able to come to terms with the loss for nearly a year. After hearing that James needed to deal with Evelyn's suitor, Hunchback invited him to his home. Over a glass of cognac, he listened to his problem and said, Bizarre Zero. The problem is solved so that he will not soon forget what his name is. David used to work in the ambulance. As Evelyn found out, he asked her, when she gets mad, she gets silly. That's what she said. And he was also sitting. He had a ring on his fist. Well, if such a kid and happy, smiled Humpy. Do you know where I was sitting? No. Then I'll do it myself. If he's not an outlaw, he's finished. They won't come within 2 steps of me again. Satisfied with what he heard, James bought some vodka and went home to celebrate his victory. He could consider his wife's suitors finished. In the evening, he was awakened by the ringing of the intercom. By some means, getting to the receiver drunk, he pressed the button and opened the door. Elatedly, realizing he wasn't expecting guests, he was about to return to the kitchen when he heard the doorbell ring. Who? He asked, trying to see through the peephole standing on the landing. Hunchback. Open up. The familiar crossed the threshold in the company of two ambassadors. Do you know who you ordered? He asked James. No. The boy's just like the boy. That's what I thought when I saw him. My guys found out this David was in the same prison as my boss, and that David saved his life, that the big one was on his head for him. Now he even gave him my address, you know. What am I supposed to do now? You don't go near your ex. You don't lay a finger on this David guy. My boss will stand up for him. Tell him to deal with you. And I'll have to come to you and talk to you differently. You got it all figured out. James was stunned. This was a turn of events he had never expected. 6 months later, David asked Evelyn to marry him. As a place, he chose the restaurant where his beloved invited him to dinner for the first time to thank him. Prepared a speech from rehearsed several times in front of the mirror in the flower store, bought the most beautiful bouquet that was, and went to meet Evelyn from work. When the dishes were ordered, David looked into Evelyn's blue eyes and realized he had forgotten all the words. The only thing he could say was, "Will you marry me? I know I'm not a handsome prince and I don't make much money, but I want to make your life a fairy tale, as much as I can. Will you agree to be my wife?" Did Evelyn's eyes light up at what she heard? Yes, of course, yes. Taking her beloved by the hand, David put a gold ring with a heart-shaped garnet on her ring finger. Happy Evelyn, she hugged him and kissed him right there in the restaurant. "I love you," she said. "And I love you," he replied, smiling. "When do we start planning the wedding?" "You surprise me. I've never heard of a man taking the initiative in such matters. I can't wait. You'll take my last name, won't you?" Evelyn nodded and asked when Max would tell me. "Let's do it today, for God's sake." I can't believe it. By the way, about Max, if he doesn't mind, I'd like to give him my last name too. Are you serious? He's jumping up and down for joy. More than once I've been told by Uncle David is so cool when I can call him my daddy. Hearing that made David feel warm inside. He didn't. Pleased, Evelyn smiled. I didn't think that after my divorce, there would be a man who would love both me and Max. I was afraid he wouldn't get along with my new husband. And not everyone wants to get involved with a woman who has a child. David took her by the hand. After calculating how much money it would take to play a modest wedding, they started saving together, working as a veterinary assistant and occasionally moonlighting. David himself sometimes barely made ends meet, but he didn't give up and kept saving a little bit at a time. Ask Evelyn to take out a loan for this event. His conscience wouldn't let him. He could not take it himself because of his criminal record. Upon learning of the situation, David's parents offered their financial help to the couple as a gift for their wedding. Happy to hug his mother and father, he called his sweetheart, and in a cryptic voice said, "Guess who I have good news for?" "For whom?" asked the beloved in a sobbing voice. Evelyn's voice alarmed him. "Sunshine, what's the matter? Why are you crying?" asked David. "I am in the children's hospital. Max lost control, hit a curb, flew off his bike, and broke his leg." "What kind of fracture?" "Closed. Open, open, open. And there's a splinter. They're taking him in for his first surgery. They say it's better to do a fusion for a fee. If I want Max to be able to walk normally in the future." "David, is it true that without a good operation after an open fracture one often goes limp?" Taking a deep breath, he answered. "It's unfortunate, isn't it? Free surgery usually doesn't yield the best results." Hearing these words, Evelyn burst into more tears. "God, where am I going to get the money? I don't want my son to be lame. Not for you, but for us. We are almost family. Do you really think I would leave you in a situation like this?" David was on his way to the night shift. He wondered where he was going to get the missing money for Max's surgery. Suddenly, on the side of the road, not far from his place of work, he noticed barely moving and bloodied dog with golden hair. It was a Labrador covered in canine pricks. Realizing he wasn't ready to leave the animal without help, David called a fellow veterinarian and asked him to help transfer the animal to our clinic. He examined the dog. The partner said that the Labrador had suffered serious injuries from a stray dog attacking it. We administered all the necessary medications. We treated him early. It remains to keep an eye on him until the owner comes, said the colleague. Offer to place an ad. The dog has a collar, probably purchased not only for beauty and reinforcement of the leash. Usually expensive dogs wear one, with the owner's name and number written on it. Take it off to check it out. David walked over to the sleeping Labrador and followed his partner's advice. The vet was not mistaken. The owner's phone number was written on the inside. Looking at the time, David realized he would call him in the morning. It's unlikely the owner would appreciate such a late call, even if it was a beloved dog. The night shift went very quietly. The guy even managed to take a nap. Toward morning, the Labrador woke up, and with its barking woke up not only the other pets of the clinic, but also David. After doing his chores, he decided to call the dog's owner. "Hello," answered a man's voice. "Speaking. Good morning. I'm calling about the dog. Have you found my Kai?" The man asked hopefully. "Yes, he was with the course. Oh my God. I hope you took him to the doctor." "Yes, he's with me now at the veterinary clinic. I can send you the address. That's an extra dictation. I'll be there. How can I reach you, if anything?" "Robert. What's your name?" "David. Nice to meet you." "Wait for me, David. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. David's shift was over. Recently, he had been sitting in the cozy office of a veterinary clinic, waiting for the owner of a Labrador. His eyes slid tiredly over the pages of a magazine taken from the lobby, the lines of which his mind was not focused on as David thought about surgery for Max. The only option he could think of was to borrow money from everyone he knew. Otherwise, he would simply not be able to raise the necessary sum quickly. The door of the clinic swung open. David stepped out of the office. On the threshold stood a middle-aged man whose face seemed familiar, but who was tired from the night shift. There was no way he could remember exactly where they might have met before. The man was tall, slender with a mustache of hair, much of which had turned gray. When he looked up and saw David, his expression changed and his gaze froze. "Are you?" he asked with surprise. Looking at the boy, "I'd forgotten your name, David. Now that's someone I didn't expect to see here." David announced the alarm. He remembered where he had seen this man and heard his voice. Before him stood Robert, the father of the same Liam who had put him in jail. The boy tried his best not to remember the unfair trial that had ruined his marriage and separated him from his family for 5 years. But now, confronted face to face with Robert, all the memories came to the surface of his mind. "Are you after the dog, Robert?" he asked, trying not to betray his bitter feelings. "You remember my name," he grinned. "I have not forgotten it after all these years. And I thought to you too, expecting new claims." David asked me tensely, "Why? If you had not been imprisoned then, our children would probably be alive now," he answered and cried. This turn of phrase caused the boy to become confused. Robert took a handkerchief out of his pocket, wiped his face, and continued. They crashed. Then they both went on a drunken race about a police general and the cars we'd given them, going over 100 at least. They didn't make the turn. Death was instantaneous from horror. David's eyes widened. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely. "Don't be. We deserved it. When they put you away, it was such a sin we took on our souls for our sons. You taught Robert the wrong lesson then, making him not to be arrogant and to respect others. We didn't understand that. A long time ago, tragedy struck. A year after the trial, Liam gave me his last birthday present. After my son died, he was all I had left. My wife didn't get over the grief. She left after Liam." Robert burst into tears and wiped them with a handkerchief. Tears asked where he was, by the way. "Shall I take him out now?" David answered. When he returned the dog, he told him what medication the Labrador would need. Robert purchased them from the pharmacy that was located right there in the clinic. Then he asked, "Did you save him?" David nodded. Like my son, you are a good man. Even prison didn't break you. The guy sighed. But it was no use. I lost my wife, my job, several years of my life, my apartment. Now everything seems to be getting better. I was thinking about getting married, but my fiancé's son seriously injured his leg. He needs a surgery, which is not enough money for my meager salary. Robert said to me, "You want me to help you. I am very indebted to you. I can give you the missing amount. How much do you need?" David gave me a number. The interlocutor took out his smartphone, asked for his card number, and made the transfer. "Thank you very much, Robert. You helped me a lot." "Thank you very much. You saved my last comfort after my son's death. I heard you were a good doctor before. I knew here. Do you think he'll agree to help?" He agreed to ruin his life. If he refuses to rebuild it, he will lose respect in my eyes. You have to right your wrongs. The man and the dog left, leaving David in deep surprise. The smartphone made a short beep. A new message came in. He looked at the screen. It was a notification of a transfer Robert had made to his account. A week after this conversation, David received a call from the head doctor's private clinic inviting him for an interview. Unable to contain his own joy, he called during lunch to his fiancée and asked, "Hi, honey, stay tuned. I'm at lunch. What do you want? I have some news." The prosecutor did listen to Robert. "I got a call from the chief medical officer and asked me to come in for an interview." "Oh, wow. They're really gonna hire you with a criminal record. We'll know in a couple of days. I have news for you too," Evelyn shared. Max's latest surgeries were successful. The chief doctor of the private clinic was named Leo. During the interview, he honestly admitted to David that he called the ER and asked about him as a doctor. "David, you have an impeccable reputation. Minimal complaints from patients. No censure from superiors. Terrific results. How will you prove your credentials? I will be glad to see you in the list of doctors of our clinic, and my colleagues will not be embarrassed by my past. First of all, they won't know about it. And secondly, the prosecutor himself vouched for you. He has never once let us down when he asked for a job. How often does he call you, if it's no secret? This is the third time. Thanks to him, the clinic has 2 doctors of the highest caliber, including the only anthropologist in the city. Rare specialist. We didn't have them before. Nugget moved here a couple of years ago. I don't think he'll disappoint us either. I'll do my best." After 3 months at the clinic, David felt his life was finally on the right track. He became a respected physician and a favorite of his colleagues. Patients signed up with him a month in advance, making his salary grow larger every month. In addition to his professional development, he had other plans for his future. To marry Evelyn. His steadily increasing income allowed him to do so without a wedding loan to save up the necessary amount of money in 6 months. The couple began preparations. Evelyn chose a beautiful country estate surrounded by nature. As the venue for the celebration, they decided to place the tables under a white canopy. David chose a silver men's suit with black field, jacket label, and a silver bow tie. It was exciting to get married a second time, but he knew he wanted to. The bride and groom did not sing during the celebration. Puzzled by this behavior, the guests furtively asked David, "Why didn't you even buy champagne? Are we planning a baby?" Evelyn strictly adheres to what the doctor said. "I'm keeping her company too. It's exactly 6 months since we've both been sober." "Oh, well, good luck," said his comrade, raising his glass. "I have faith in you." Nearly a month has passed since that magical day. Coming back to work from a vacation, he was taking to relax with Evelyn and Max at sea. After the wedding, David was going out for coffee with a colleague when the phone rang. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. "Is something wrong, or you just want to talk?" "I have good news for you, I hope." "I do not know. It depends on whether you want to be a father or not," said the spouse with a smile. "From what I've heard." David froze for a few seconds, then asked excitedly, "Are you pregnant?" "Yes, Daddy." Congratulations,